I'd like to open this up to the audience for a few questions. I think we have time for a few. Is that all right? Can we,
I apologize that I'm more a film person than a book person, but I am here, and I did read the book 50 years ago. And although you hinted at it, about 10 minutes after I wrote the question, you are all aware that there's no work of fiction. This is unique. There's no work of fiction that 50 or 60 years after its introduction, after all those thousands of vaudeville productions, engendered at least half a dozen film, in the early days, productions. So something that could inspire with its melodrama and its sense of Victorian outrage, almost like Cecil B. DeMille. It's like a popola with a moral tract attached. You get to see sin and bad behavior and then all sorts of expiation at the end too. So this was unique as far as I know, and I haven't Googled to find out how many actual, but there's at least half a dozen or more productions, film productions that came in during the early teens.
That's very interesting. Do you have a response?
Yeah.
Let's do another one.
Okay, how about right here in the front row?
Okay, my question is in regards to Hillary Clinton. Did she handle her household according to what you all are discussing in the best way possible?
Well, that's an amazing question. Now, did Hillary Clinton handle her household in the way that Harriet Beecher Stowe might have encouraged? I'll let you take that, Roxana.
What aspect of Hillary Clinton's household are you thinking of? Are you thinking of sweeping under the furniture or opening the windows at night?
Well, I mean, whatever that you feel strongest or connected to in terms of, providing an answer towards, because, I mean, she had a household. I mean, you all said that, right? And so with that being the case, I mean.
I don't think we know.
Okay.
I mean, she's not dictatorial. She doesn't say this is the only way to deal with this series of these situations. She's saying these are the issues.
Yeah.
Here are some ways of dealing with them, and women know a lot more than they are given credit for. I think the way Harriet Beecher Stowe would say to deal with your marriage is make it work, and you would know best how to do that.
But the other thing is, because of Catherine Beecher, one of the things that Harriet Beecher Stowe is interested in is housework and how it gets done, because it was so onerous and difficult in the 19th century, especially the farther you got west. And so Hillary's household would not have been just her marriage in those days. It would have also been, how do you do the dishes? How do you get rid of the sewage? How do you keep food from spoiling? What do you do when the children get yellow fever? So I think that Harry was quite interested in practical issues that we can hardly even imagine now.
I'm finding this a wonderful discussion, really exciting to hear novelists talking about this work in its literary form, but I'm a historian, a largely political historian, and for me, the way I actually teach this is it's not primarily a novel, it's a work of propaganda. It is a political act, it's really a weapon of war. And the choices that she makes are not aesthetic choices, they're choices to maximize the impact that this book is going to have. And so I think that's what the guy is saying in the review that you read from 1853. Her exaggerations are for a purpose. They do exactly what they need to be. And her modulations, her dialing the horror down, it fits exactly what Adam Smith talks about in the theory of moral sentiments, that the person who is in distress has to dial it down, and the person who is fine has to try and empathize, and you meet in the middle, and that's sympathy.
Do you think that that propaganda or Jeremiah must be diametrically opposed to the art of fiction?
I would say that every novel is political, and what happens is that if you live in an essentially liberal society, then the novel fits in to your society. The novel is always about somebody and the group he or she lives in, and whether they can get along or whether they are in conflict. That means the novel is essentially about power relationships, which means that it's political. So to us, a novel seems apolitical, even if there's a strong individual in it. But if you take the form of the novel to some place like Stalinist Russia or some countries in the Middle East, and you propose to write about an individual in conflict with his group, then you've committed a political act. And so, since all novels are political, this doesn't strike me as, I could go into on this at length, but in the circle of the novel, of all the things that can be part of a novel, polemic is there. And let's say in A Tale of Two Cities, polemic is there. Does that make it less of a novel than David Copperfield? No, it just makes it a different type of novel.
Right. I'm not saying that it's not a novel, but
Yeah.
that its primary purpose in its time, as she saw, was less about entertaining people than about making change.
Well, she wanted to do something. I think that that's right, yes.
Well, I'd say it's, once you step into the category of these are the issues that the novel raises, and then you bring that, let's say, to your students, you're definitely political. Because you're saying, this is what's important, this is what I want you to get out of this novel, I just don't want you to read it and walk away from it. So essentially, you're politicizing, no matter what the piece is here. You listed those things in those two categories, and that's what you really want your students, the gist of what you want your students to get out of it. To me, that's basically not Stalinist Russia, that's an extreme, but it's basically, okay, as a teacher, here's what I want you to take out of it, and we're going to test you on it too.
Yeah, but what novel would you choose to teach that wouldn't be political? Just name one as an example.
It's political.
No, I want you
if
to
you
name
make
one.
it
Well, I think there is something, I mean, all through high school, I had no idea Hawthorne or Emerson had ever said anything about black people. Because when I was in school, racelessness was equated with timelessness. And anything that had sort of race or argument in it was a flawed work. Whereas, sort of this kind of untroubled or, not troubled by things that were troubling America, then that was a kind of sort of timeless work. I mean, every novel is an argument in that sense.
Yeah, right. All novels are about conflict, and you can choose to read the conflict as a microcosm that represents the country or the universe, or you can choose to read it about two people at the breakfast table. Anna Karenina was written because Tolstoy thought the divorce laws in Russia were so unfair.
And it's full of stuff, information about agriculture. About agriculture.
And he also thought that serfs should be banned. So there are certainly political impulses that drive many great novels, and Jane is right. I mean, all novels are about conflict. All writers, if you asked Aunt Hattie if she thought it was a work of art, I bet she would say it was. I bet she was making choices for, she thought, she was definitely making choices for aesthetics, not as to use this. I also don't have the sense that she thought she was going to start a civil war.
No,
I don't think that was
I
her
don't think,
plan.
judging by the resistances that she was writing about at this time, I don't think she thought that was a possibility. I just don't, I think she thought
I don't either.
the country was united in exploitation. It wasn't going to change.
She wanted the book to change something.
She wanted
didn't
change.
necessarily wanted to cause a
No, she
civil
was
war.
Right.
taking a side, certainly. I think also one of the reason I wonder about is sort of the idiom of the book for me has dated, and the problem with a lot of 19th century American fiction for me is the dialect, this kind of idiom that keeps it historical for me, even Twain.
Yeah, but that's what if you're in school, that's what you're,
That's what you're getting.
When I was in 8th grade, I always say this, but one of the most influential books for me in my youth was Giants in the Earth, about Norwegian people on the plains of the Dakotas suffering one hellish experience after another and freezing to death, Did I care? I loved the book. Did it occur to me to I don't know, I just loved it. It doesn't matter that it was that they were locusts. I don't know. I think a kid can take it.
Okay.
I
We
read
have-
the Prince and the Paul program.
We have time for just one more question. We have 3 extraordinary writers here if you have a question for them. Yes.
Well, I'm curious if you see any writers on the stage today who you think could approach something, a political topic. Maybe they have in the last 3 to 5 years and it's just percolating, or maybe they're about to, or do you sort of see anybody on the horizon who might do that, or a topic that might be worthy of sort of taking up arms? And
Well, stop looking at me.
Why?
No, I think that I have attempted to be political in a lot of ways. I think one of the things that has happened is overpopulation in every conceivable way. One of the great things about for Stowe was that 1 million copies in what was probably the population, 50 million people in America? And in those days, people read aloud from the periodicals, and so they estimated that 1 copy actually equaled 15 readers. So today there is such a plethora. There's so many people, so many books, so many bloggers, so many issues. It's not that I don't think that there's somebody who could make a difference. I don't understand how they would do it. I don't understand what the social mechanism would be that would arouse it. But they didn't know that it was going to happen in 1851 either. And so what happens is this thing jumps up and suddenly it's like a mushroom cloud and you're in it. And you don't know how you got there. And I think that could happen.
Vampires.
Vampires.
But you're joking, but you're not joking. Could you just expand on that a little bit more?
So before this, Noreen said she was looking at the bestseller list to see if there was any comparison to make between this book and what people were reading now. And she said they're all thrillers and vampire books. And I said that's actually not unrelated, because what Stowe is doing is mounting this great panoramic view of the forces of good and evil. And Tom is the martyr. He is the man who dies for our sins, like Christ. But it's like the end times sagas or the vampire sagas, or a thriller, which is about a hunt for evil and its destruction.